Welcome to another episode of our personal empowerment audio program, Finding Yourself in Paradise. Hi, I'm Michael Benner.
And I'm Steve Snyder, and our program today is entitled Getting Older. You know, in thinking about it, I remember the first experience I had of noticing the getting older concept was when I was about 4 years old, watching my little brother go from crawling to walking and thinking, wow, he's getting older. He's definitely, he's not a baby anymore. He's walking. And then I remember the next major passage I had was when I could finally ride the big boy bike, the two-wheeler without the training wheels. I definitely felt like I was getting older when that happened. And then my bar mitzvah, we go through this ritual of today I am a man. I definitely felt older then. Driver's license, moving out, first apartment, first major relationship. There are a lot of passages
Old enough to drink alcohol.
That never mattered much to me, given that I don't drink alcohol. But the idea of being able to vote, that was a big one for
big passage.
And much more recently in my life, now taking care of my mother, and that definitely is a passage making me feel older. The thing I've noticed in my life about getting older is that most people become somewhat more knowledgeable, some more than others. A lot of people become pretty experienced, and some more than others, but not everybody becomes wiser. And although most people do, not everybody becomes more mature either.
Well, one thing that's obvious about getting older is that the younger you are, the greater the rush to get older. And then after a certain point, as you get older, you wish you could put on the brakes somehow. I've heard it said that human beings are different from other animals in only a couple of ways. One is animals may not have a sense of humor. I'm not sure that's true, but I've heard it said. Others say, actually, there's also the likelihood that animals cannot reflect upon their thoughts the way humans do. But one thing we can agree on for sure, and that's that animals do not really know of their own demise. They have some sense of it because we can see mothers attempting to protect babies that have already died. There is that affinity, there is that bond. But according to all the research, it seems to be pretty hardwired, pretty chemically driven rather than emotionally driven. It's more instinctual than intuitive, so to speak. And so maybe we are the only animals that know of our own demise. And yet we spend our lives ignoring it and denying it, and we are, especially in the West, a culture of youth. And advertisers try to sell us their goods through something we can't have, which is youth. It's a youth-identified culture, almost worshiping youth, and thereby saying, essentially, as an advertiser, you really can't have your youth back, but you can buy this product that this young person is using.
And given that youth is wasted on the young, you get to have a little bit of it yourself,
I think there's something to be said for that, the idea that youth is wasted on the young. So what are we going to do with the fact that we're all getting older? The idea of death and taxes, right? I think let's set it up differently than we have. Let's set it up as some cultures, like the Hawaiian culture, for example, to be the best part of your life. Senior citizens in Hawaii and Polynesia are venerated. I thought it was an Asian thing when I first came out here, but it's really not so much as it's a Polynesian Hawaiian thing to venerate the old. But why wouldn't we set it up that way? Why would we set it up so that we worship the youth and disregard the value of the elder in the clan, and they just get tossed aside and ignored, and rather than looked upon for their potential wisdom? And, hey, what could I learn from this old-timer? He or she's been around the block a few times and probably have learned a few lessons. Maybe there's something in that. Not only for people who know those who are older, but, of course, it would have to begin with the person themselves who's getting older, deciding, I want to set my life up this way. I want learning as a lifestyle. I want the first third of my life to be about growing up, the middle third raising a family, and the last third, could that be about me? Could I just set aside the last third for psychological and spiritual growth?
Can we make the best part of our lives the end of our lives? I remember, I think it was Robert Browning said to his wife, Elizabeth Barrett Browning, "Grow old with me. The best of life is yet to come, the last for which the first was made." I mean, that's the whole basic idea, is like we use youth to grow and learn and get experience and hopefully begin to mature, and then we use the middle portion of our lives to create the success and move into the feelings of fulfillment, and then it's not about coasting, it's not about retiring. Now it's about appreciating. It's about moving into the giving back and the gratitude and the being appreciative as we get older and older. The real key to growing older, I think, is to make sure not only do you become more knowledgeable and more experienced, but also that you do become more mature and that you do become wiser. And those things don't come necessarily with aging. You know, we can get chronologically older without getting any more mature, still stuck in those same stupid habits we had when we were in our 20s and 30s and 40s. We can get a whole lot older chronologically and remain very unwise about, you know, people or the places or experiences in our lives. That doesn't come automatically. That's an earned process, wisdom and maturity. And I think that's where getting older, in the process of growing older, we can begin to focus our attention. Yes, become more knowledgeable, become more learned, become more experienced, you know, but more important than doing stuff out there, which you've spent your whole life, now start going in here and now start understanding about how to become more mature. That is, how to understand yourself better and how to become wiser, how to not jump to conclusions, how to see the big picture, how to understand other people's ways of thinking. Those things are where the magic comes in getting older.
Well, let's talk about some of the lessons we've learned. I'll tell you in no particular order, one that pops into my mind sitting here, thinking of this, listening to you. From the late 70s till the late 80s, actually, I worked at KABC Radio in Los Angeles. And there were a couple of guys in the morning, I know you remember, you were there, Ken and Bob.
Oh, Ken and Bob.
And Ken and Bob had this slogan that they mentioned virtually every morning of the week, which was Egg Bach, everything is going to be okay. Now, I was there in my late 20s and early to mid-30s. That's how old I was at the time. And I thought that was a cute saying and a clever bit of marketing and probably a good idea for a morning show. But I'm not sure I really believed it. Now, looking back on it, I know it's true, especially when I know that it's true. For the belief that everything is going to be okay promotes that kind of an outcome. Life, in many ways, is self-fulfilling.
Things work out best for the people who make the best out of the way things work out.
If I knew things were going to get worse and worse, as many of my more negative friends might, then there's a likelihood they would unconsciously sabotage themselves and, ironically, come up with a lot of evidence why they ought to be negative, why they ought to be pessimistic. The irony is they don't see their hand in creating that evidence, right? So I like that. I like being at a point in my life now where I really believe, you know, old Ken and Bob, they were right. Everything is going to be okay.
Because this too will pass. Because nothing is permanent. We see, the older we get, the more we have evidence that everything changes, everything grows. Change is inevitable, except from vending machines. I always like that one. You know, it's like it's going to happen. It's not going to last. It's not going to stay the same. That beautiful. We talked about it in the last show. The idea of owning a beautiful vase and you knowing that one day it's going to probably get knocked over and broken. You know, like everything has its day. Everything has its life. So knowing that changes the nature of the way you view growing older.
It's a sublime lesson, and it's easy to overlook this idea of looking at everything that you possess or that you think you own somehow as if it is in a passage too, just like you are in a passage in getting older. And it may be appreciating in value. It may, like a fine wine or an ancient vase, as Steve mentioned, actually appreciate and be worth more. But that doesn't mean it's going to last forever. Nothing lasts forever. How many of these really expensive bottles of wine that have been appreciating in value turn out when they're uncorked to be vinegar? You know, it happens. And sooner or later, if you accept the idea that sooner or later, I mean really accept, not as an ending, not as a point of giving up, but as a place from which to move forward. That's what I mean by acceptance. That, as Steve has said, all things do pass. We live in a world that is cyclic and therefore impermanent. So let's roll with the program. Let's really value whatever you own or possess and treasure right now, knowing that if it breaks, you could say, well, of course, it had to sooner or later. That's a really smart way of looking at the loss that we all fear. Just accept that you're going to lose it. You don't have anything you're not going to lose. That might initially be terrifying, but if it is frightening, it just means you haven't explored it yet. The more you explore that, the less frightening it becomes, and there's a certain kind of wisdom then in recognizing that all things will pass, so I treasure it even more now.
So looking at the idea of getting older through the passages, it occurred to me to look at it from the point of view of body, mind, and emotions, like what's the passages for the physical body of getting older? I remember a few for me that were significant. One was a summer where I grew 6 inches in one summer. I went through this huge growth spurt, and I went from, I think, 5'3" to 5'9" in the summer kind of thing, and I don't think I gained a pound. I just spurted right out, and it was a huge growth spurt. It was a huge physical awareness of getting older. And then I remember another awareness of getting older is I had this clumsy label put on myself. Like I thought I was, kind of awkward and geeky and clumsy. Probably because I grew 6 inches one summer, and I reached for a glass of water, and my arm was longer than I thought it was, and I'd knock it over. But I had this image of being awkward and clumsy. And somewhere in my 20s, I sort of got athletic. Like I feel like I grew out of this thing where I was awkward. Like my baby fat went away in my mind. And then I remember hearing in my youth and then experiencing not that long ago Bill Cosby's great line about how he knew he was getting older. He woke up one morning and he heard a noise, and it was his father's noise, that groan his father used to make, except it was coming out of him. He's like, I'm making my dad's noise. I'm making that noise. I noticed, in somewhere in my 50s, I started once in a while making that noise, and my body was definitely getting older. Couldn't do as many jumping jacks as I used to do, couldn't play basketball the way I used to do. I actually decided to change and started working out and released a lot of excess pounds. Don't lose weight. You always find it again. Released a lot of excess pounds, and now I'm in really pretty good shape. But as a response to my body getting older, I needed to do something to youth it. So I'm feeling younger now than I did before. But physically, there are definite passages that come along the way.
Another passage that comes to mind for me, I can even remember the restaurant I was sitting in at the time when this occurred to me, when the light bulb popped on over my head, and I went, holy cow, this really is all made up. I started thinking about, where does the authority that police have come from? And I thought, well, the law, right? And then I thought, well, where do the laws come from? Well, people. And then I thought, well, which people? The authorities, the lawmakers, or the larger group, the citizenry? It's supposed to be a democracy after all. And what allows, the state to have this authority where a lawyer can put on a black choir robe and send people to capital punishment, right? Some would argue that's state murder, but because the lawyer had a black robe on and called himself a judge and spoke on behalf, ideally, of all the American people, and the authority invested or vested in him by those people, had this authority and this power, but it was agreement. It was essentially an agreement. And then I started thinking, well, but we don't all agree on everything, so it's a dynamic agreement. Like, why are we fighting this war when 70% of Americans don't want us to be there, if the authority to fight that war comes from the American people? And so it wasn't that I came upon any great resolution other than understanding the psychology of reality, that perception is reality. I understand the reality that is objective in nature, that is, by all accounts, rather fixed, even though we believe all things are in flux, all things are changing. Nevertheless, I'll acknowledge that there is such a thing as an objective reality. But much more important is our personal reality, and to consider that much of what we agree as real is merely little more than an agreement. To me, that was liberating, incredibly freeing.
And age, whether you feel old or not, is an agreement as well. People choose to feel old. People choose to feel young, regardless of their chronology. I know people who were like really old when they were in their 20s, and I know people who never got old. Benjamin Franklin said, if you have love in your life, you never grow old. You might live a long time, but you'll die young. It's like, and there are people who chronology has nothing to do with their age. They're like old since they were little kids, and other people stay young as long as they live. A lot of it has to do with whether they live in the present or they live in the future, whether they deal with delayed gratification or instant gratification, whether they mature in that way. They did a wonderful experiment where they said to a bunch of little kids, I'll give you a marshmallow right now, or if you wait like a minute, I'll give you two. And so most of the kids wanted the marshmallow right now, and a small percentage of the kids were willing to wait for the two. Well, as it turned out, years later, when they looked at these same kids, the ones that chose to wait for the two, they did like 200 points better on their SAT tests. They were better at conceptual understanding. They were better at thinking. They were better because they
smarter.
They were smarter because they grasped the idea of, well, two's better than one, and like waiting's not, something I can do. It's worth doing that for that. They started thinking about their lives being exciting, opening up to new possibilities. Things could even be better. I get a marshmallow, but if I can do this, I get two marshmallows. That kind of thinking.
Yeah, they're believing in something they haven't seen yet called the future. And that's a breakthrough for children. And the earlier they're able to do that, that shows a real high cognitive function to be able to extrapolate from the present to the future. I know many adults would rather have the one marshmallow now, right? Especially if we're obsessive eaters. That's something I've had to deal with my whole life. The idea of why I eat and which appetite am I really feeding.
Even credit card debt and using your mortgage as an ATM is the one marshmallow now, if you think about it.
That's right. I want it now.
Yeah.
Instant gratification. Yeah. And we say, well, that's immature. How childish can you be? How impulsive? Well, we've been trained and encouraged to be impulsive, and it is immature. It really is childish. It's, I want mine now. It's the ego.
Dylan said, man is opposed to fair play. He wants it all, and he wants it his way. That's really true. It's not like the idea of it being fair. I don't want fair. I want to win. And most people look at it that way.
We talked about everything's going to be okay, the wisdom in recognizing that the glass is always half full, right, as opposed to half empty, and about to get more full, not draining. I think that's the important part of that whole paradigm.
Indeed.
Well, I think another part of the wisdom that can come with age, especially if you consciously choose to work on it, is that all things will pass in terms of your emotions. And I'm talking about the negative emotions that can drive us out of our minds, cause us to do things we later regret, cause us to say things that, we reflect back on and can't believe actually came out of our mouths. And what was that about? And to be able to remember in the moment, I've been through this hundreds of times, and it always ended up being okay. Now, maybe you were in a dysfunctional family that just ignored the problem, and it didn't ever really go away. It just repeated itself. Maybe you were in a high-functioning family where people really did work it out. But I'm saying, while the latter is better, in any event, it tends to go away, right? This will pass. If it's a sunny day, know that it will rain again. If it's stormy and cloudy and wrecking your parade, raining down on your picnic, the one pleasure you can take is know that it won't last forever. And as we say in Hawaii, no rain, no rainbows, the sun will come out again. And to anticipate that there's wisdom in that. See, looking at things really simply and recognizing the pattern as you get older and older and older, you can begin to see into the future. You know what's coming. It's a pattern you've seen all your life.
So in that pattern of arguing and fighting and immature emotional behavior that theoretically we can grow out of as we mature, I think the shift that takes place for many, not all, in the maturation process is it's an emotional management process, basically. It's letting go of the need to be right in exchange for understanding the other person's position or point of view. It's experiencing their fighting with you as your first thought is, well, I'm safe here, and I don't need to be right. I just really want to understand what's going on. If you experience without defensiveness when somebody's coming on strong and you get well, I'm safe, and I really just want to understand. I'm curious, what's their energy on this one? Why are they so, excited about this? I want to understand. That, to me, was the hugest shift in the maturation process, was no longer knee-jerk reacting, no longer jumping back with defensiveness, but being willing to explore, taking a deep breath, and seeing if maybe I can step back and see the other person's point of view. That, to me, not everybody learns to do that, but in learning to do that, I think that's one of the great maturations.
Not sure who gets responsibility for this one. I don't have attribution, but I've heard it said, and this is part of the ageless wisdom or the ancient philosophies of the world, those that have stood the test of time from all cultures and societies, that to add to what you know is to gain knowledge, but to gain wisdom, the experience that comes with age, we really have to begin to edit, to release what we already know, to let go of it, take a step back, and mindfully see the bigger picture in very simple and direct terms. And then, as you mature, as you're able to make this transition from simply acquiring knowledge to learning great wisdom and applying it then in a variety of areas in your life, you're slow to react. You're more likely to substitute responses for those reflexes. And, of course, only good can come from that. There's fewer mistakes made. The mistakes that are made are seen as opportunities to learn and to grow. You're less likely to miss an opportunity, to leap ahead. If you have that one step back, that mindful zooming out a little bit to get the bigger picture, it's to see things more simply. Again, we often believe, especially in our youth, that what we need to solve the problem is more knowledge. Often what we need is less knowledge and more wisdom. Look at the bare bones. Take a step back. Look at it as simply as possible. I think maturation can bring that. I know maturation can bring that. Age can bring wisdom. But it sure helps if you consciously dedicate yourself toward developing that wisdom and that strategy of taking a step back and creating a context, getting the big picture, not just the little details, not just the logic, but the whole gestalt, the enchilada. What's really going on here? A lesson we can learn, understand, incorporate, and even pass along to others.
So you step back and you look at what is the big picture. And, of course, it's how do I survive into old age? That's, how do I best survive as long as possible? And so if you think back, what our distant ancestors always did was, in thinking about that, they had lots of babies, as many as they could have, because some of them wouldn't survive, and hopefully they had a few that would survive into old age to take care of them, to help them when they got older. It was their retirement plan. It was their idea of social security, to be able to create a way of being taken care of when you got old. Now, if you think about it, in today's world, how many people don't look at the issue of what am I going to do to retire? I mean, how am I going to fund my life? Have I started saving early enough to do the lifestyle I want? How much is it going to cost, and how much do I need to save to make? So many people don't do that kind of looking into the future and thinking, okay, I want to help me survive the best into old age as possible. It's in our DNA to want to do that. Well, I think a lot of what I call maturation is looking at that issue, looking at your life and your survival issues and your money and your desires, what you want to do to create, what makes you secure meaning from the Latin self-care. That's an important part of wisdom, is taking a look not just at the today, not just the what was the fable where the squirrel put away all the nuts for the winter and the other creature didn't put away any nuts and starved in the winter? You know, I mean, we gotta remember the basic idea of we need to put something away. That's old age, I think, is best dealt with when you prepare for it, you know. And I guess, who was it? Peter Drucker, I think, that said that the best way to prepare for the future is to create it.
Yeah, right. Napoleon said, I am not a victim of circumstances, I create circumstances.
There you go.
Yeah.
And he did.
Till Waterloo.
Yeah.
I guess he created that too. Well, in many ways, you're back to this idea of delayed versus instant gratification. And we have to look at the stress factor here, the degree to which most people are so extraordinarily overstimulated. That's read by the brain as stress and potentially dangerous. And so people are just focused in, what do I want now? They're more likely to come from not only a place of immediacy and urgency, but everything is a crisis and everything is a disaster. And my God, if you watch television news and the cable pundits, you can scare the bejesus out of yourself. I mean, there's lots of reasons just to be terrified and sit home in the corner eating your knuckles, right? You're just so freaked out. Well, we don't have to do that. We can turn off those stupid news programs. Every once in a while, check the headlines on the internet so you have some rough idea what's going on. But make your life, first and foremostly, it seems to me, about your life, about your responses to what seems to be happening to you. See, we're surrounded by people that obsess on the stimulus. They even want to control other people. And that great old Eastern saying about trying to cover the whole world with leather when you could just put on a pair of shoes. Tolstoy said most people want to change the world. Few people ever think about changing themselves. Yet that's where your power is. The majority, I'd say the vast majority of our issues about control go away when we stop trying to control what's done to us, the stimulus, and instead control our perception and response. I think, again, that comes with maturity. That comes with having celebrated and suffered, having your trials and your tribulations. You know, your edges are a little bit beveled, you're a little more well-worn now, a little more mellow, a little more slow to react, and likely to see those bigger lessons. So I think maturing, especially if we do it consciously and deliberately, is a wonderful thing. I like being older. I'm thinking of all the mistakes I'm not going to have to make again. I'm sure I'll make many in the future, but there'll be new mistakes for the most part. Look at all the mistakes I'll never have to make again, some of which are lessons I've learned from watching other people, but most of them lessons I've learned from going through it myself.
But in the wisdom comes the ability to learn lessons from other people. And without the wisdom, we don't accept those lessons. I mean, when we're younger, we got to try it out for ourselves. We got to make sure it doesn't work for us. But as we get older, I think we begin to see the wisdom of not having to jump off every cliff, of not having to, learning from the mistakes of others. That's a big part of wisdom. And I think in that maturity and that wisdom of learning from other people's mistakes as well, one of the things that we can do as we get older, and I think our society needs us to do this, is to start mentoring the younger. That's one of the most important things about being older, is you can mentor younger. That's how it always used to be. One of my pet peeves has always been that our school system won't let the senior citizens come into the classroom to help. I mean, there's millions of wonderful senior citizens that would love to have something to do and be in the classroom and help the teachers. One day that's going to happen. It's such an obvious mix that the older people helping the younger people. That's just the way it always was throughout history, And so the old joke of grandparents and grandchildren always get along great, and it's probably because they have a common enemy. But for whatever reason, they do. So what I think we need to begin doing more of is venerating our elders, putting them into a position where we can learn from them and look up to them, much like they do here in Hawaii, and create the senior citizens and the youth of our country coming together in a way that is beneficial for both.
It's fascinating to consider that as we've lost the support of the tribe, we came to rely on the extended family. That's pretty much the situation we found ourselves in, going from tribes or clans to an extended family. That was replaced in the 20th century with a nuclear family. The cousins and the aunts, you didn't have like here in Hawaii, the big ohana, the whole family and cousins 5 times removed and hundreds of people who are all related and everybody knows everybody. Now you're down to mom, dad, 2.2 children and a golden retriever.
Maybe a gram or grandpa, but that's, about it.
But they're likely to live in another city.
Likely.
And now we've lost even that. Now the parents are both working. Nobody's home after school. And so we've lost the support of that. You can blame the parents, but again, you have to have 2 incomes to keep your head above water. It's no secret the consumer spendable income is way, way, way down in the last 30 or 40 years. The idea one unskilled person who worked real hard 40 hours a week could support a whole family and have a new car every 2 or 3 years and own a home at 2% interest. And wow, the Treasury's been raided. We've been plundered. Those days are long gone. At the same time, I think part of being wise is watching trends, and we can't really wait for these jobs to come back. Whatever age we are, part of the wisdom of the experience we've gone through, I think, is recognizing there needs to be more in each of us of an entrepreneurial spirit, more of a, I can do this, I can be a little more self-reliant than I have been before. There are some disadvantages. It's really nice to pick up a check every Friday and know it's always going to be there and know it's never going to bounce until you get a layoff, right? Until some CEO decides the best way that they can make hundreds of millions of dollars and retire with a golden parachute is to lay off 20,000 workers and export the remaining jobs to the third world. Good for them, but horrible for the economy and for the people involved. And yet there's no debating the trend. The third world is burgeoning. They want what the United States and Europe have. They're moving in that direction. These 20th century jobs, especially these industrial jobs, are not coming back. And I think part of getting older, part of getting smarter, part of becoming more mature is also becoming more independent economically. Again, you don't have the tribe. You don't have the extended family. Most of us don't have a nuclear family to rely on anymore. You're pretty much on your own. Rely on yourself. Work to be independent, mentally, emotionally, and physically, to find gainful employment, doing something that really needs to be done, that some big, huge multinational corporation would never even think of doing. Like being of real service, finding a real human need and meeting that human need. We can reinvent America that way, but it takes wisdom, it takes maturity. I think it takes the leadership of the adults that have been through the last 40, 50, 60 years. You talk about seniors in school, Steve. I've seen it in groups like SCORE, where executives will help businessmen and businesswomen get going in their small businesses and their startups. Why not have the same thing in school, to match the resource with the need?
Yeah, there's such great value in being older and wiser and more mature and more learned and more knowledgeable. There's such a great asset there. And I think one of the most significant things that, people do as they mature, as they gracefully grow older, is to face the ultimate question of death. As I think, to me, the last part of your life, the part where you're old, that becomes a huge issue, not only because the people that brought you up, your parents, are really old now and they're dying, and you're starting to take a look at your own mortality. And I think those people who look at death as an issue of curiosity, wonder, awe, inspiring, wow, I wonder what's going to be kind of thing, versus those who dread the very don't ever want to think about it, have nightmares that are trying to bring it up to consciousness, but you keep pushing it back down. There's so many people who avoid even thinking about death, that I think it becomes a huge trauma and determines, to me, whether people enjoy the last part of their lives or they don't. Whether they're gliding downstream toward this wonderful thing called death or kicking and trying to swim upstream against it. I experienced two things in just a few months apart. I had these two gorgeous golden retrievers that we'd brought over from California to Hawaii, and one day, out of nowhere, 8 years old, one of them died, had no thought it could possibly happen for the next 4 years, So it was a shock. I wasn't prepared for it. I'd never considered the possibility of it, and it was devastating. I mean, truly just one of the most difficult things. I just had no awareness. But several months later, we determined that the other one had cancer, and we knew she only had X amount of time left, and so we started preparing for her death. And we created an incredible ceremony. We had all of the loved ones around her, and we were petting her and telling stories about her and just like loving her. And then at the right moment, the vet, injected her, and she passed along. And it was so beautiful. It was so beautiful. And I remember it all the time. Every time I walk down to my shower, I have this incredible outdoor shower. We have the two dogs buried on the land, so I like say hi to the old, to the graves of the two dogs. And I'm always reminded of this wonderful ceremony that we had. And to me, the lesson was, your mom now, you're taking care of her. She's 90 years old, and she has some time left, who knows how much, but she's going to go. Make it an experience like the second one, be prepared for it, and make it a wonderful thing instead of holding back the idea of I don't even want to think about it and being blasted in the psyche with it.
Like all fear, our fear of death is supported by the fact that we know so little about it. Funerals, of course, are primarily a ritual that benefits the survivor. The funeral's really not for the person that's passed on. They're going to do fine no matter what. But many people feel they have to resort to a religion or a series of religions, or they have to choose some belief system. I'd like you to consider the possibility that it's not really true that we can approach our ultimate demise and view our mortality from a simple scientific point of view, which is called the law of conservation of mass and energy, and you probably learned this law in the 7th or 8th grade, and I'll bet you forgot all about it, but it says energy cannot be created nor destroyed. That physical energy can change form. It can move from light to heat, for example. It radiates. It can have polarity and magnetic qualities. There's a lot of things we can say about energy. But while you can change it and transform it and degrade it, you cannot use it up or eliminate it. I mean, consider that a log that you throw on your fireplace is going to release as heat and light exactly the amount of heat and light from the sun that it took to grow that piece of wood.
Minus the ash that's left.
There you go. You want to be technical about it. But if we gathered it all up and weighed it all and measured the light and captured the heat, there's nothing lost. Well, you don't have to be a hardcore metaphysician to extend that to, spirit is energy, right? It vibrates, it has frequency, it has its magnetic or attractive nature. We call that love, spiritual love. And so perhaps this energy, this chi or ki or kundalini or elan vital or Holy Spirit or whatever you want to call it, this esprit, this life force.
Mojo. How about mojo?
That works for me. Like physical energy cannot be destroyed. Secondly, you can learn to introspect, whether you call it meditation, prayer, contemplation, doesn't really matter. We call it paradise. Brain researchers call it the alpha brainwave level. It's an empirical place, a couple of cycles per second either side of 10 hertz, 10 cycles per second. Very real place, narrow awake, slower and more relaxed than wide awake, but, just this side consciously of being asleep and unconscious. We include one of these exercises in every one of these programs because if you did nothing else but this kind of inner reflection, again, introspection or contemplation, it's going to change you in a way that you're going to have more confidence in this idea of permanence. You too will change. There is loss involved, right? Nothing lasts in the material world, but nothing can be destroyed in the world of energy. That may be all the so-called religion you need. Go with the science that says you can't destroy energy even if you tried.
You know, I'm reminded of a wonderful George Harrison line, little-known line from While My Guitar Gently Weeps, not in the original version, but he said, "I sit in the wings, watch the play you are staging, while my guitar gently weeps. I'm sitting here doing nothing but aging. Still, my guitar gently weeps." The idea of I'm now stepped back at this point in my life. This is when he was putting together the Love production for Las Vegas. I'm looking back over my life, and I'm sitting here in the wings watching this play that we are staging. I think that's part of what comes with aging and maturity is the ability to step back and see the big picture, to look over all the things that we've done and the experiences we've had and the mistakes we've made and the lessons we've learned. So one of the great things about growing older is, maybe the best thing about it is it beats the alternative. Not growing older, either dying or not maturing, not getting more wise, not a very good alternative at all.
Yeah, it's like that other Beatles song about turn off your mind, relax, and float down the stream. This is not dying. This is not dying.
Actually, what it is visiting paradise, and that's what we're going to do right now. So relax your mind by closing your eyes and taking a really deep, deep breath. That relaxes your mind. Your mind knows you're safe when you're taking a really deep breath. No danger here. Danger would cause you to hold your breath, but a big, conscious, deep breath, boy, that signifies to the brain we are safe. So you would close your eyes, you take that deep breath, and another 2 or 3, and then finding as you release, feeling a sense of inner peace, and recognize how nice to return to paradise. Relax.
Create and sense a feeling of letting go throughout your body, from the top of your head to the soles of your feet. Feel safe and relaxed. Muscles softening, yielding, unwinding. You can easily feel the letting go. Perhaps even imagine yourself walking down a staircase slowly with every step. You actually feel yourself going deeper and deeper, becoming more and more relaxed.
More and more relaxed. Now ask yourself as you continue down deep in this alpha state, moving a little closer to sleep, in this place that feels so very nice, this place of peace and paradise. Tell yourself you have a choice. Do you want to get old or grow older? You have a choice to be in charge of the process, by and large, and you can grow gracefully older as you go. You can let yourself get old. It's easy to do, but you can gracefully grow older. That's another option available to you. And the way to do that is to focus on what you learn, focus on what you experience, focus on what you feel. Focus on understanding yourself and what makes you real. Mature, become more wise. Explore yourself here in paradise. Gracefully grow older. And as you do, the best of life will be the end of life for you.
As a mental exercise, I'd like you to imagine now saying to yourself, I'm getting older, but more importantly, I'm becoming wiser. You might even find yourself able to say, it's not that I'm getting older as much as I'm getting wiser as a result of my experience. And begin to reflect on all that you've learned that will never have to be repeated again, especially the stuff we say we learned the hard way or from the school of hard knocks. And in a mindful, detached way, almost as if your life is like the Eagles song up on the movie screen, and I know it would look all right if I could see it up there on the silver screen. Imagine that. And you in the theater, all by yourself if you'd like, watching that life, seeing you mature like a fine wine, or appreciate like a bit of artwork crafted with great care and skill. And at the same time, you see yourself on the screen, in the mirror of your mind. Feel in your body the confidence, the ease, the grace, and the elegance that comes with reviewing all the mistakes I'll never have to make again. All the problems that I'll see coming a mile away, even my own out-of-control anger and frustration, I'll see it coming from way down the road. And I'll have choices. I'll be free to choose my perception. I am free to choose my response. And instead of reacting reflexively and trying to control what's being done to me, I sidestep it, or I reach out and embrace it and waltz it across the ballroom with the wisdom, with the freedom, with the peace of mind that experience brings.
And as I become older and wiser and more mature, my ego has no need to boast. I understand it's what I learned after I know it all that really matters most. And so I live my life like more an emptying cup rather than one that's already full. And I allow myself to wonder what's on the other side of the hill. What comes next? What's after this? What's beyond this experience of bliss? Where do I go? This energy employed in me, what happens? And I enjoy the process of imagining what it'll be when my body sets this energy free. And I look forward to the experience. No hurry, I'm sure, but one day, what it'll be like. It's an enjoyable ride to imagine inside what it'd be like if, in fact, I died.
Indeed, for those who believe in a heavenly existence as an afterlife, or the attainment of some nirvana, satori, samadhi, some blissful state, a place where you will remain and rest in peace for all of eternity, consider the possibility that heaven, nirvana, is actually a place of even more growth. Or if you had a choice to sit in a rocking chair on heaven's front porch for all of eternity, or going on down that path over there just to see where it leads, I think there's more growth. I think growth is life. And healing is life. And learning is life. Everlasting.
So with that feeling of being part of the all, even though each piece is infinitesimally small, imagine that you're as essential as any piece, because we're all part of the whole, all part of the oversoul. In a few moments, I'm going to ask you to return to Wide Awake, but from this experience in this paradise, we want you all to take the feeling of growing older rather than just getting old. It feels much better when you step forward and be bold and say, I choose my path into age. Take a deep breath and bring yourself back to Wide Awake.
Thanks very much for listening to this episode. Hope you make it a practice to join us every week, whether you go to focusedpassion.com and use the built-in player and the send one to a friend gadget as long as you're here, or whether you use the RSS button to listen to the program through your browser, or a lot of folks like to use that iTunes subscription button that puts it right into the podcast folder on the iTunes program that's already on your computer. That allows you to put it on that portable MP3 player and take it with you, listen in the car, or as you jog or ride your bicycle. Listen on demand, anytime, any way that pleases you. We've made it real easy for you. So streaming, download, podcast, it's a premium audio series we encourage you to share with your friends. And as always, be gentle, love life, and take care of each other. For Steve Snyder, this is Michael Benner. Aloha from Maui.